Do you want to know who the best champions are for every class to pick and rank for the latest Paladins patch, Sun and Moon? Well, you're in luck, because today I'll be going over who I think is the best champion for every class in the game. Each category will have a few options, as there will always be champions banned out in the pick phase of Ranked, and this is especially true for Frontlines, who you usually pick 2 of on each team. As always with these tier list type videos, it is pretty subjective with my own experiences so far in Ranked, but also things like skill level and what platform you play on can have a huge impact. So be sure to let me know who you think are the best champions for every class in the comments section below. Before we begin, I'd like to thank Amino for sponsoring this video. Amino have just launched a new stories feature where there's lots of cool content on video games, anime, even Paladins and more, with the bonus of stories not just disappearing like other platforms, plus a chance to support content creators for just watching content like on YouTube. I have just released a story on the 5 worst champions in Paladins to go with the sort of best champions in this video. I also released a Paladins champions that are like anime characters, which I think are both fun, and you should definitely check them out. Click the link in the description or the pinned comment, or search for Amino apps to download the app. My username is Joshino_38, although you can find me by going to users and searching Joshino. I'm the first one that pops up and is, well, me. So you can come and view my story, plus be sure to hit that follow button and bell icon when you land on my page to make sure you catch all of my upcoming content. Back to the video. Let's start off with the damage class. Fluttering to first place is Willow. Willow has had several buffs. First of all, she has had a huge flutter increase. This can get her over obstacles she never could get across before, taking her to parts of maps that she probably couldn't get to before as well, making her extremely flanky, and also really adding on to the damage she could do already, and generally making her kit more rounded. A lot of the time you can flutter straight up into the air, fire on the top of an enemy without them really being able to track you very easily. On top of this, they've buffed her ultimate to be very much more maneuverable whilst you're actually in the air, plus you can cancel the ultimate whilst you are in the air. I think especially on Bright Marsh, Bazaar, Jagger Falls, she completely wrecks if she is left alone. On Bazaar, she is extremely hard to deal with once she's used an ulti, and overall I think she's kind of maybe worthy of a ban at the moment. She's definitely one of the best damage champions in the game at the moment, and probably the best blast damage champion at the moment. Rolling up next is Cassie. She's still strong. It's been pretty much every patch that she's been pretty strong, although I think with the nerf to big game, meaning that there's less time to shoot enemies before that extra damage buff goes away, I think actually Impulse is now mostly the go-to talent card, especially for the fact that you'll probably often have a Genos or Tyro buffing up your damage. Then you can amp your damage up to the point where you don't really need the big game anyway. I think that the time reduction really makes it that enemies can hide or get around a corner without you being able to chase them like you could before with the big game hunter. Sliding up next is Lian. She still is one of the best and most pinpoint accurate and also annoyingly auto-aimy and resetty champions. So again, the meta currently is presence and resetting the presence with eliminations and with cards, and the burst that she can provide can usually kill most flankers or other enemy damage dealers in a very short space of time. The only real way to try and counter it is to watch out and see when those presences are actually on cooldown. Plus her ultimate pretty much is a save me now and probably kill the enemy safety net. Up next is Tyra. So Hunter's Mark is such a big deal in matches in terms of the damage amp it gives to your entire team, and I think is a huge deal in terms of winning matches too. And most of the time that we've had her in our team, not necessarily when I've played it so much, but she has done her work and made it so that the enemy team have an extremely hard time to deal with her. And also having somebody marked the entire match pretty much, you can pretty much keep that mark on the damage dealers and the flankers to make sure you know where they are all the time. Makes it extremely hard for them to be aggressive and actually dive your backlines. Next up is Bomb King. These last two are a bit more situational. I think as long as there isn't a Wormjet Drogos on the enemy team, the Bomb King still has crazy damage and control of that damage. They have some of the highest mobility in the game, matching some flank champions, and also they have all of that control of the map with their crowd control and their ultimate. Lastly on the damage is Drogos. I think this is just because of Wormjets at the moment. It's kind of brokenish. It's been this way all along, and as long as they don't have a Leon on the enemy team, or it's been banned out, or you've already taken it, and there's no snipers in your team, then you can pretty much have invulnerability during most of the match because the maps allow you to stay in the skybox. It does sometimes mean that you're not as active in the match and doing as much damage as, say, you could do if you're a Fuhrer Drogos, but at the same time, it means you have no downtime, and also you can be annoying and also distract so many enemies. I would probably put this along with some of the most annoying champions currently. Moving on to the next category, the flankers. A new boy has slid into a good spot, and that is Lex. So this is with the Death Hastens legendary card. I think because the damage fall off at range is so minimal, and you can poke damage so many enemies for quite a high amount of damage, it makes it so that you can act almost like a flanky damage dealer, like the Leon, like the caster. You can actually do quite a lot of damage poking at range, and then also with your movements and your low cooldown ability to slide, you can get up into enemies' faces and chase them down. Plus, I think actually with Death Hastens, it actually makes sense to use In Pursuit now. This is the auto lock-on one. Basically, before you could fire your pistol faster than In Pursuit, so it just didn't really seem much point, and you'd be so close to enemies that you probably hit most of your shots. But Death Hastens, you're a bit more cautious with your shots, you're a bit slower. But if you get somebody down to like a slither of health, then the In Pursuit is actually a great tool to finish them off, and also to quickly finish them off after a shot, for example. I also don't think it's necessarily too hard to get headshots with Death Hastens if you're careful with it, because the shots are pretty pinpoint accurate, so the damage output on the Lex can be insane. Next dashing in is Maeve. So one of my favorite champions in the game just because of how fun they are, but also one of the best in my opinion. Her Midnight, the ultimate, has been nerfed this patch because resilience now affects it, so you can take resilience so that the Midnight, the basically being blinded, will last less time. However, I don't think that's necessarily what made her strong before. It's in her base kit that makes her great. She's super agile, she can escape most situations, and she has the burst potential with Cat Burglar to do extra damage with that talent card after you prowl. Plus, she can harass at range, so do sort of the role of a damage dealer, whilst also being able to drop in and chase down enemies with the flankiness of her. Because, yeah, there is no damage drop off on those daggers. Next up is Eevee. So she's super mobile as well, probably even more mobile than the Maeve in some ways, especially versatile with the Wormhole talent card, and in some hands and in decent players' hands, she is crazy, and she hasn't really changed much from the last patches. She's just been great for a long time. She's great at chasing down enemies, harassing backlines, and basically she is a pain in the butt, a bit like the Wormjet Drogos in all honesty. She's very, very, very hard to kill, and it can really take the attention of the two backline damagers and maybe even the support to try and deal with her, which means that the rest of your team kind of is in a 4v3 situation almost. Moving on to the support section, and Io isn't out quite yet, so I'm kind of interested to see how she'll fare in the ranked meta. I'm apprehensive as to whether she'll be good enough because of her kind of weak main heals, but then again she does have a lot of utility, so she might actually do quite well with keeping Luna on the point and stuff. However, first up, floating in, is Genos. It's been this way for a long time, and this is because of the talent card Luminary, giving a buff across the whole match and to a lot of your teammates at the same time with a damage bonus. Basically, other heals drop off during the match. Sure, there are other healers that do more burst heal, and in the first round they might be able to keep a tank up whilst somebody's firing directly at them, but that will drop off as Cauterize comes out. And I also think that Genos has a lot of not burst healing, but healing over time and healing multiple allies that are out of combat. It basically allows your allies who have just dipped into cover to heal up pretty quickly and then go into the fight again straight away, and you could do this on a few allies, and I think he does quite well at that. He does quite well at not necessarily in your face healing, burst healing, but that healing over time. As people retreat, they're going to be getting the heal, and they won't need to wait necessarily for the out of combat healing. Though he will mostly be banned at higher levels, he's pretty much an insta ban, so you might not see much of him, and why we need so many supports. Next up is Maldamba. Again, they haven't really left the top spots for me. They're good heals, and their ult fire of the Gourd is good for group heals, so a mix of pinpoint healing and group heals, but they also have a lot of power in controlling fights with their stun and with their ultimate, plus an escape that gives invulnerability and can dodge most enemy ultimates, which makes him strong. So next up, I think these have changed a little bit. So Fuhrer is actually doing very well at the moment. Cherish has bounced back, and I know a lot of people were actually down on it and thought it wasn't very good, but it's performing a lot better than we expected. Fuhrer also has some good crowd control with her beam, and also she's got a useful ult with invulnerability and that team buff, but also can deal quite a punch herself damage wise when you're healing with that extra damage, and even harassing mobile damages with her hit scan and spread. It's actually kind of decent to have her into a Wormjet Drogos. You could knock them down with the beam, and you could also hit them with your shotgun sword. Next up is Grover. So he works best on small maps like Jaguar Falls, where it's easier to keep in range for his heals, but he has high mobility, a good crowd control in his cripples. Finally, his ult early game can win a point fight, and generally I think he's good at healing and as good as a main healer. Finally, so this one is very kind of air. I think hi-rez is an okay main healer to fall back on if everything else is banned out and it's a pretty big map. She has a good escape, crazy raw heal early game, and a strong ultimate, although she tails off hard to the late game with Cauterize. And this is where it's interesting, because I was looking at the website Better Meta, which tracks how well champions are doing at certain ranks, and actually Ying is doing a lot better than hi-rez at the moment. hi-rez is doing pretty rubbish, so that's something to bear in mind there, but I haven't actually personally seen a Ying perform that well for a very long time in ranked. Finally, we move on to the Frontlines, and for the moment the meta sort of is split into having two tanks, 1 point tank, somebody to basically stand on the point and keep it as long as possible before they can move off and let the support sit on it maybe, and then the aggro tanks and the off tanks. These are almost flankers that have a lot of health. They're going in, bullying the enemy backline and generally trying to deal as much damage as possible. So on the point tanks we have Barrack, a lot of damage and poke with their tinkering talent card, and most importantly their bowling board shield card and mobility make them extremely hard to kill on the point. They can just basically dodge in and out of their shield, dodge around with a bowling ball on, and they are relatively unkillable even though they don't have a super high actual base health points. Also, with the pass buffs to the ultimate, it actually makes the ult really scary. Moving on to, in my opinion, the second pick, what I think word you might pick after a Barrack is taken, is Inara. She's my second choice because she just doesn't have quite as much impact as a Barrack and can't quite poke as well as the Barrack, but she has huge damage reduction cards and make her insanely hard to displace if the rest of her team are still alive or any of her teammates are still alive. You just can't really burst her down very easily at all until she is singled out. Next up is these aggro tanks, the off tanks, and up first is one of the newer champions, Atlas. So his displacement is insane and will or should force the enemy team to take resilience at some point. His damage and control to be able to poke at range with that charged up shot or burst up close makes it so that he has so much versatility in poking enemies at range and then also dealing huge damage up close. On top of that, his shield blocks all projectiles, and even though it's on a long cooldown, it doesn't last very long, it has such a big effect. Plus, whilst his ultimate can be a waste if you do it in the wrong time, you might even save somebody, it also can win a point if you keep people from charging onto the point and contesting. Next up is Karl, and this is with his Storm of Bullets talent card. It does crazy damage and you can harass enemies whilst toggling your shield, keeping it up, and most importantly, his ult is a guaranteed kill on most maps. I think especially Karl and Atlas do very well with a damage buff from a Tyra or a Genos, or maybe both, because they have so much damage potential, and that sort of goes incrementally with those damage buffs. Next up is Makoa. He'll most likely be banned, so don't worry too much about him, but his hook is the biggest deal about him. It has no crowd control reduction, you can't get resilience to stop it. The damage on his shots are strong, and his mobility is relatively strong as well. Next up, another one that will likely be banned is your Grandpa Torvald. Just the shields. It's just literally that. The shields and the damage bonus from the buff is rather insane, and you probably won't have to see him, you won't have to worry about him, but that's pretty much it. He's kind of almost like a support rather than a point tank. I couldn't really put him with a point tank, so he's kind of an aggro tank, but not really. Ashe kind of fits into both camps. She can be a point tank, say if they ban out the Inara or the Barrack for some reason. Mainly they'll ban out the Inara to try and take Barrack themselves if they're first picking perhaps. But yeah, she is strong generally, her ultimate is strong, She's got a survivability, especially I think at the moment with her shoulder bash talent card, but between her mobility to get onto a point with the charge or to get away from something, and that damage resistance, and also being stunning and being invulnerable for a while, and the fact that a weapon can harass enemies around corners and walls, she is quite a strong pick. Anyway, those were all of my picks and best champions for this current patch. There are some things that you might not think are best champions, so again, let me know what you think and why you think certain champions aren't necessarily as good as I think, or are better than I think. Let me know in the comment section below. Anyway, if you did enjoy the video, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe for more of my content, and hit that bell icon to never miss any more of my guides and tips. Joshino signing out.